How do you catch a killer who leaves no fingerprints, no witnesses, no connections, and no motive that makes any sense? In the next 8 minutes, you are going to see how a Harvard-educated genius terrorized an entire nation for 17 years using handmade bombs, and why the FBI, with all its resources and technology, never caught him. His own brother did. Because this is not just a story about bombs or terror or a manhunt. This is the story of what happens when one of the most brilliant minds in American history decides the whole world needs to be punished. It started with a boy who was too smart for his own good. Theodore John Kaczynski was born in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois, the son of a sausage factory worker and a school teacher. From the very beginning, it was obvious he was different. By age 5, he was reading at a level years ahead of his peers. By 10, he was solving algebra problems. By the time he reached high school, his IQ had been measured at 167, a number that placed him in the top fraction of 1% of the entire human population. His teachers pushed him forward. His school skipped him 2 grades ahead, and that decision quietly broke something inside him. Suddenly, he was the youngest, the smallest, and the most socially isolated kid in every room. While his classmates developed friendships, navigated teenage life, and figured out who they were, Ted sat alone. He had no social skills to match his intellectual ones. He had no framework for connecting with people his own age or older. He was just a strange, intense, deeply uncomfortable boy surrounded by people who either mocked him or ignored him entirely. At 16 years old, he was accepted to Harvard University. His parents were proud. Ted packed his bags and left for Cambridge. It would be the beginning of the end. At Harvard, Ted enrolled in a psychology study led by Professor Henry Murray, a study that would later be described as ethically disturbing. Students, including Ted, were subjected to intense, prolonged psychological stress, their most personal beliefs and values attacked and dismantled by trained interrogators in session after session. For a young man already struggling with isolation and social disconnection, the experience left marks that never fully healed. He graduated. He earned a PhD in mathematics from the University of Michigan. He became an assistant professor at UC Berkeley, one of the most prestigious mathematics departments in the world. He was 25 years old. He had everything ahead of him. Then he resigned without explanation, moved back in with his parents briefly, and in 1971, at the age of 29, he moved alone to a remote piece of land in Lincoln, Montana, a small plot with no electricity, no running water, and no neighbors within shouting distance. He built a small cabin with his own hands, and he began to disappear from the world. For years, he lived almost entirely off the land. He grew food, he hunted rabbits, he read, he wrote, and slowly, quietly, in the privacy of his remote Montana wilderness, his thinking darkened into something nobody around him could see coming. He had come to believe that modern technology and industrial society were destroying human freedom, stripping people of autonomy, meaning, and connection to the natural world, that the system could not be reformed, that it had to be destroyed, and he decided he would be the one to start destroying it. In May 1978, a package was found at the University of Illinois. It appeared to have been accidentally returned to its sender, a professor at Northwestern University. When it was opened, it exploded. The Unabomber had begun. Over the next 17 years, Ted Kaczynski mailed and planted 16 bombs across the United States, targeting universities, airlines, and technology companies. 3 people were killed. 23 were injured. Some lost fingers, hands, and their eyesight. The FBI assigned a dedicated task force, UNABOM, and launched what became the longest and most expensive manhunt in the Bureau's history at that point. They had almost nothing to work with. His bombs were handcrafted from materials available anywhere: wood, wire, nails, household chemicals. He left no DNA. He wore gloves. He used untraceable components. He mailed packages from different cities to avoid pattern detection. For 17 years, he was invisible. Then he made one demand. In 1995, Kaczynski sent a 35,000-word manifesto titled Industrial Society and Its Future to the New York Times and Washington Post. He promised to stop bombing if they published it in full. They did. It was a calculated risk, and it worked in a way nobody expected. A man named David Kaczynski, reading the published manifesto, recognized something chilling in the writing style, the ideas, the specific turns of phrase. He recognized his brother. David contacted the FBI. They obtained a search warrant. In April 1996, agents surrounded the small Montana cabin. When Ted opened the door, he was covered in aluminum dust, in the middle of building his next bomb. But here's what this story is actually about. It is not really about bombs, manifestos, or 17 years of terror. It is about what loneliness and brilliance can build together when there is nobody around to interrupt the process. Ted Kaczynski was not born a killer. He was born a boy who was moved too fast through a world that had no idea what to do with him. Skipped through childhood, pushed through adolescence, subjected to psychological experiments at Harvard, and eventually left completely alone with nothing but his own mind and a growing conviction that the world had failed him. Genius without connection does not always produce greatness. Sometimes it produces a cabin in Montana and 17 years of bombs. Theodore Kaczynski was convicted in 1998 and sentenced to 8 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. He died in federal prison in June 2023 at the age of 81. His manifesto is still read and discussed today. Not because people agree with his methods, but because some of his observations about technology, autonomy, and modern disconnection turned out to be more prescient than anyone wanted to admit. And maybe that is the most unsettling truth buried in this story. The most dangerous man in America for 17 years was not stopped by the FBI, not caught by surveillance, not traced by technology. He was stopped by someone who loved him enough to turn him in, his own brother. If this kind of story keeps you up at night the way it keeps us up, there are more where this came from. Every week on StickFiles, we go deeper into the cases that broke the rules, the criminals who outsmarted everyone, and the mysteries that nobody has fully solved yet. Hit subscribe so you never miss the next one, because trust me, the next case is even stranger than this one.